Welcome back here to X's and Bros on the Michigan Sports Network. Danny Cahalan, Ryan Elke, Anthony Bellino, all joining you. Join us now, senior writer of The Athletic, covering the great game of college football. Our good friend Chris Vannini. Welcome back to the program, Chris. Studio audience, they love you. How are you? How's life? How are things now that we're finally to that weekend, right? That Final Four is finally here.
Yeah, it kind of snuck up on me until early this week. I've been watching so many bowl games over the last few weeks. You kind of just forgot that the semifinals were going to show up at some point. And yeah, now it's finally here.
Speaking of the other bowl games, have they felt the same now that, it's kind of routine. It's not like the college football playoff is anything new. It's been around for 7 years now or so. And we're looking at expansion, so it's going to grow even further, and that's going to change things. We don't know how the schedules will exactly work out or how things are going to look in the future. But has the regular bowl games, have they changed at all for you personally?
I think you just kind of have learned to enjoy them for what they are, which is just an exhibition game and just extra football. Like you don't need to make any wide-ranging, sweeping assumptions about a team all because of how the bowl game performed. It's just a lot of these bowl games are just in their own kind of universe and whatever. You just kind of some teams you may not have ever watched before. But look, it's football, so I'll watch it for 3 hours and have some fun learning who the New Mexico State quarterback is and just stuff like that. So I think we've learned to just appreciate bowl games and not maybe put too much on them.
And it seems like the chatter has, outside of one kind of, crazy headline about Jackson Smith and Jigba, who, hasn't, the guy's been injured for most of the year anyways. And, it's like, oh, he's skipping out on the bowl game in the college football playoff to enter the name into the NFL draft. It's like, really, it's not really that. The guy hasn't been healthy. Why would you play in this if you haven't played all season? But it seems like that chatter's kind of, been dialed back a little bit or dialed down as far as guys skipping out on the bowl game exhibition to start preparing for the draft. Or maybe it's happening, we're just not talking about it as much.
No, I don't think it's really much of a talking point anymore. It's just kind of assumed at this point that a lot of the top guys who are going to the NFL don't play. And it quickly became normalized, and I think that's, again, totally understandable, given, injuries you periodically see in this sport. And there might be some old school people who are still mad about it. But again, I think a lot of us have adapted to just understand the bowl game is it's just a game. It could be under unique circumstances. And I think after seeing so many more and more bowl games where the head coach isn't there, it's maybe even more understandable when a player on some team doesn't play, because everything has happened so quickly now.
Yeah, there was nothing stranger than what took place, speaking of head coaches not being there, than what Louisville was going through and having, in just the coaching, kind of, carousel, the shuffle. One coach is going to, completely Cincinnati and Louisville. One coach is going to abstain because he doesn't want, to, be a part of the game plan. I'm just going to go recruit, not going to worry about the whole thing. It's a mess that is college athletics in its present day. So now as we look to the Final Four, I want to start with the nightcap with Ohio State and Georgia. I feel like there's a lot of Ohio State fans that are, saying pretty vocal on the Twitterverse that, nobody wants to see Ohio State. Their last time out, they didn't look really great. They kept it close. I think the score got a little bit out of hand there and doesn't necessarily tell the full tale of how Michigan beat Ohio State, and thank God they beat them again. Happy about that as a Michigan man myself. But I don't know where all of this chest puffing is coming from the Columbus area with the fans that believe that nobody wants to see Ohio State. I mean, they're going to go take on the number one team in the country.
Yeah, it's weird because, Ohio State, we know they still are one of the most talented teams in the country. And if you gave Kirby Smart truth serum and asked him if he'd rather play Ohio State or TCU, he'd probably say TCU. So it's just kind of the nature of the beast. Ohio State has been one of the top programs in the country for a long time at this point. This game is going to tell us a lot about, I think, the state of Ohio State football. They've been to the playoffs a bunch of times, but they've lost in blowout fashion quite a bit. I know they won the championship the first year, but they got blown out in the championship game by Alabama a few years ago. They've had some losses to Clemson. And if you lose a second straight game to Michigan, followed by a blowout loss to Georgia, then where is Ohio State football? It's not. It's not the best team in the Big Ten. It's not one of the top four teams in the country, and it should be because of everything that's in place. So there is a lot of pressure on Ohio State here. Not that they have to win, but they have to put up a respectable performance.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. And the posturing to me, it's like, okay, well, we've got we know that their passing attack can be lethal at times, but it's not like Georgia's sitting around only scoring 20 points a game. I mean, this is a team that's putting up nearly 40. You look at total yards per game, it's 492 for Ohio State, 491 for Georgia. And Georgia probably plays a tougher schedule throughout the course of the length of the regular season with a balanced offensive attack that features 200 plus yards on the ground and 284 through the air. I mean, Georgia is the real deal. They're number one for the country. They have a championship. I know that they replaced a lot of guys on defense, and I think that we saw that a little bit early. But did they kind of sleepwalk through the season a little bit?
I don't know about sleepwalk. I don't think they're as good as last year's team because they lost a record number of NFL draft picks off that team. But they are built a little bit differently. You've got two elite tight ends now in this offense. You've got running backs you can throw to out of the backfield. They had some odd performances. The Missouri game was one. But this is an offense that has been very good and also has a lot of margin for error because that defense is still, once again, one of the best in the country. So Georgia comes in. It's a team that can hit explosive plays, but it's a team that can just hit you in a lot of different ways. Again, running backs out of the backfield. You got tight ends you can attack the linebackers with. You've got receivers who can go deep. So it's a team that is really can excel in the ways that Michigan, hit some big plays against Ohio State, frankly. So I think that's going to be key. Ohio State cannot allow the big plays because those are the plays that cost them against Michigan.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I look at this game, and I'm not asking you, and I'll preface our listeners this. Take this with a grain of salt. The spread right now, Georgia is a 6.5 point favorite. To me, it feels respectable. It feels a little light. I don't know. I don't know why I feel like that Clemson 34-0 game that they put on Ohio State a few years ago. Like maybe, I don't know, but I don't think that Ohio State gets shut out here. But I don't think that this is actually a close football game. I think this is Georgia by a pretty wide margin. Am I crazy? You can tell me if I am. You're not going to hurt my feelings. More people tell me that all the time.
Well, I think this game could go a lot of different ways, and I feel like it's going to be close early. Ohio State maybe takes the lead or keeps it close, but then there will be something either in the second quarter or early in the second half that goes Georgia's way, and we'll have to see if Ohio State can rebound from that. We've seen that a few times in previous big games where games have been close for them and then a couple of things go wrong and they crumble, So if that happens against Georgia, is Ohio State going to crumble or are they going to be able to get off the mat to handle the adversity that they face? Because they don't face very much because they're a very talented team and they're not those positions. But we've seen them in big games kind of fall apart as the game goes on. So I'm curious to see if that moment comes again.
Yeah, if they can punch back and survive that wave, that avalanche of momentum. It's football's a momentum game, and if they can survive it, if they can counterpunch, or if it's going to end up like kind of the snowball effect that we saw with the kids from Ann Arbor this year in Columbus. Speaking of those Michigan Wolverines, they'll get number 3. TCU. Did you have any issue with the seeding there of TCU at 3? I thought it was a no-brainer. They made it to their conference championship game. They lost it. I kind of felt like they were in the whole time. I didn't think you could, hold that loss against them. So I was fine with them at 3. Obviously, if you're not a TCU fan or if you're not looking at things as objectively as possible and you're a fan of Alabama, you're a fan of Ohio State, you might throw your arms up in the air and say, hey, wait a minute now. What did you think of TCU's placement at 3?
I think it made sense because the only other team, that they would have been contention with was Ohio State, which lost in blowout fashion in previous games. So you kind of had to leave TCU at 3. And even though I know, like I said, if you give Kirby Smart truth serum, he'd rather play TCU. You kind of got to take everything into account when seeding these teams, and ultimately TCU being at 3 was the one that made the most sense.
Were you surprised at all, Chris, at with Blake Corum's injury and Donovan Edwards playing with an oven mitt strapped to his dominant hand? at how good he had been under the circumstances there. Those final two games, the big one obviously against Ohio State, where it just felt like big run after big run, and then in the Big Ten, the championship game there, just the fact that he was able to step in, playing with an injured hand. He's a ball carrier, and he's still out there having the time of his life.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan's running game really has carried itself, and that's what had worried Ohio State so much going into the game, even with Blake Corum not necessarily playing. That's what opened up a couple of big passing plays because this team can run the ball. The offensive line has won the Joe Moore Award. It's the best offensive line 2 years in a row, so that helps anybody. And then Edwards' ability to hit the big play has clearly been, his strength. When you get to that second level, he can blow by guys, especially Ohio State and Purdue, which were pretty slow at linebacker and on the outside of it. And that's what I'm curious with TCU. They got some pretty good defensive backs. Is Michigan going to go up the gut? Are they going to go outside? How is TCU going to handle that? Because TCU pushed around at times. Kansas State was able to move the ball on the ground against them a couple of times. So I think the opportunities are going to be there. And for TCU to have a chance, it starts with slowing down the Michigan run game.
And as we look at TCU and how Michigan is going to attack them with J.J. McCarthy, as you cover college football, from the 30,000 feet view, right? You're covering the entire world of college football. So when you look at Michigan, does it frustrate you at all? Maybe that's the right word, at how J.J. McCarthy was used at times when we saw, obviously, his receivers made some big-time plays in that Ohio State game. But just the ability that we saw early in the year, the first couple games where he would air it out 40 yards on a dime, and it's like, we're going to see this all season. And then all of a sudden we hit Big Ten play, and it's like, no, we might pass 15 times in a game. That's going to be it. Turn around and hand it off. Did that frustrate you to watch as somebody covering the landscape of college football?
No, I mean, I had the similar thoughts. I mean, up until the Ohio State game, I was unimpressed with J.J. McCarthy, and it said as much for a guy who came in with all that hype and all that arm strength. The guy who won the quarterback job, I thought Cade McNamara was better last year. He throwing the ball, he played very well, especially, and got better as the season went along and made some big throws that they needed to make. This year's Michigan team just kind of never really needed many of those throws, and ultimately when the Ohio State game came around, Ohio State had so geared towards stopping the run that there were some single coverage down deep. There were a couple of blown coverages, and McCarthy made the throws he needed to make. He hasn't been particularly, super impressive, but he's done exactly what he's needed to do. He's run when he's needed to run, and he's created just enough big plays when you need him. And that's what I'm curious about. If TCU is able to slow down the run, can J.J. McCarthy make the big plays like we saw him do against Ohio State again?
And can those wide receivers win some of those one-on-one matchups against the Horned Frogs secondary there? So with Michigan being a 7.5-point favorite, does that feel about right to you? How do you feel that game number 1 will go tomorrow afternoon?
Well, as I think there's a few ways Ohio State could beat Georgia. I feel like there's only one way TCU can beat Michigan, and that is they're able to slow down the run game and they hit big pass plays. TCU's offense near the top of the country in deep balls and deep completions. There was a stretch against Kansas State that their entire offense is basically just throw it up to Quentin Johnston, who's one of the best receivers in the country, one of the best guys at going up and getting the ball. So I expect if TCU gets single coverage on the outside, they are going to throw deep. And if they are able to hit a good amount of those plays, that's the only chance they have. They have to make those plays. Michigan's defensive backs have been very good all season. They're going to be tested in this game because of that. Because I do think Michigan's going to clog up the trenches. I don't think TCU is going to be able to run the ball very well. So TCU is going to need explosive plays to win. If they don't get them, I don't think they're going to win.
What did you, Chris, when you saw that news come out about Mazi Smith and everything that was, tied into that, the timing of it all, what did you pull from that whole saga that now it's down to a misdemeanor? So, it just kind of is what it is at this point. But at the time when the story came out, It was a big deal, obviously. In Michigan, you're from Michigan. You know how it is. Michigan State versus Michigan fans. Who gets preferential treatment? This is once again the blue wall shielding and protecting Michigan. What did you think when you first saw that news? Because for me, it was a head scratcher. It's like, why not just sit him down for one game, suspend him for the game? Here's the incident. Let's all just move on with our lives. But nobody really says anything about it. Then it comes out in the wash, and now everybody's kind of scratching their heads, and we're still kind of talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, as relates to the details of his, arrest, he says he was a few days ahead. I don't know exactly all the gun laws and what they are, so I can't speak to the legality of all of it. I just thought the biggest, as with everything in the state of Michigan, it comes down to Michigan and Michigan State and how different people treat each other. I don't like, and I thought, one of Michigan State's staffers, Darian Harris, made a good point. I hate that fans of both schools are demanding all this strictest punishment possible for players of another team, especially in a justice system that can sometimes be unfair to young black men. I was mostly upset that Jim Harbaugh would really be so upfront and just really strong at punishing the MSU players for what happened in the tunnel, given he had a player on his team having his own issues. It wasn't just heat of the moment, after the game. It continued later on the next week, and then you've got players being charged. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know all the details of it. I thought charging players for the tunnel thing was kind of ridiculous too. I think everybody just needed to chill out about all of this, but it's the Michigan State rivalry, and that's never going to happen. And the result is you just got angry fans on both sides continuing to get more and more angry at each other, especially online.
The people mad online. Who would have thought? Last one here for you, Chris. Prediction for the weekend. Who are the winners in the college football playoffs? Who are we going to see meet in the national championship? Will it be number 1 versus number 2?
I've got the favorites, which is how it often plays out. I've got Georgia and Michigan in a rematch. I just think I think Georgia has been on another level from everybody else. TCU has been a really fun story, but I just kind of think maybe it's not a great matchup for TCU in that game against Michigan. Ohio State just isn't enough of a team. I think Michigan and Georgia play again.
He is Chris Vannini. You can find his work in The Athletic. Find him on Twitter at Chris Vannini. Chris, my friend, thank you for your time today. We greatly appreciate it. Enjoy the weekend and enjoy the college football playoff semifinal, my friend.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Is it going to be number 1 versus number 2? We'll find out tomorrow with the semifinals of the college football playoff. It's already here. All these bowl games, all the madness that's been taking place. A couple of good ones yesterday, and then a full slate of games. It's not just the college football playoff semifinals that are tomorrow. We'll get into that in hour number 3 in our college football best bets.